Hi friends, welcome back to my channel. I'm Lora Rolling and this is part 1 of the Blessed Drummer Ornament tutorial. This is the Blessed Drummer Ornament that we are making. It is so cute with all its drums and crosses and musical notes. And today we're going to be making the unit called Musical Notes. We just have a few materials to get ready, so let's get them listed and then we can get started. Let's go. So the beads that we're going to be using today are all Miyuki Delicas. I have opaque black, white pearl AB, silver lined gold, silver lined crystal, and bright copper plate. Just to keep it simple, I'm going to call this black, white, gold, silver, and copper. We'll also need some beading thread and a beading needle. I like to use the Eslon Fire thread in the color crystal. This is a 4-pound thread. You could also use a 6-pound thread if that's what you have. And then I like to use a size 10 beading needle. If all you have is a size 11 or a size 12, that would work too. For implements, I like to use my long nose pliers to hold onto my thread at the end of the video. And then I cut my thread with scissors. And today I'm going to show you how I use the fire method to end the tail. Now we'll also need a plastic crafting ornament to complete this project. We won't be using this in today's video, but to do the complete ornament, you'll want to get your hands on one of these by the time part 5 comes out. So this is a 2.36 inch plastic crafting ornament, and I buy these in bulk at my local hobby store, but if you just want to get your hands on 1 or 2 of them, you can always order them in my Etsy shop. So let's thread our needle with about 3 feet of thread, and then we can get started. So I've threaded my needle and now I'm ready to pick up my first 3 beads. Let's pick up 2 black beads and 1 white. Now I'm going to take these 3 beads and I'm going to pull them down to the bottom of my thread, leaving about a 6-inch tail. Now let's tie a square knot. So cross over on top and then pull your tail through. And then cross over on top again and pull your tail through. So now you should have 2 loops. I'm going to put my 2 fingers in the lower loop, the one that has the beads in it, and then I'm going to tug on the tail thread and the long thread until that top loop turns into a knot. Now I'm going to take my tail thread and I'm not going to touch it to the flame, but I am going to get it super duper close so it melts the tip. And it turns the tip into this little teensy knot. Now, keeping my fingers in the loop, I'm going to pull on the long thread while I twist the loop until that little knot at the end of the tail touches the long thread or meets the long thread. Now I'm going to take my thumbnail and I'm going to pull that knot all the way down to the beads, turning the beads into a little triangle. And that completes row number 1. So if you notice, our knot is right in between those 2 beads, and we want it to look like it's coming out of the white bead. So tug the long thread until that knot looks like it's coming out of the white bead. And the thread actually looks like it's coming out of that bead also. So now we're ready to pick up our next two beads. Let's pick up one white and one black. Now it looks like we're coming out of this white bead, so let's sew through the black bead. And then we're going to try to get those two new beads to sit right on top of the ones that are below them. I like to call those below beads, they're buddy beads. So they're sitting on top of their buddies. Now let's pick up two white beads. And we're coming out of this bead, so let's sew through the next bead. And once again, try to get those two new beads to sit right on top of their buddies. Now let's pick up one black and one white. And we're coming out of this bead, let's sew through the next bead, and this time we're going to sew through its buddy also. When we sew through two beads like this, it means that we're stepping up, putting our thread in position to start the next row. So this completes row number 2, and now we get to start row number 3. Let's start by picking up two white beads and sew through the next bead. Now let's pick up one black bead. And we're coming out of this bead right here, the second one. So if you notice, the next bead would be sitting downward a bit. We're going to skip that downward bead and we're going to sew through the one that's poking up, the up bead. And it pops that new bead right next to the downward bead. Now let's pick up two white beads and sew through the next. And now we'll pick up one white. Once again, we're going to skip the down bead and sew through the up bead. Now let's pick up two white beads and sew through the next. Always making sure that they're sitting right on top of their buddies. Now let's pick up one white bead. This is the last bead in this row. We're going to skip the down bead and we're going to sew through the up bead, and we're also sewing through its buddy. It's those last two beads, meaning we are done with this row, and now we get to start row number 4. Let's start with one white and one gold bead and sew through the next. Then one white and sew through the up. One black and sew through the up. Two white beads and sew through the next. One white and sew through the up. One black and sew through the up. Two white beads and sew through the next. One white and sew through the up. And one white and sewing through those last two beads. Now we get to start row number 5. Let's start with 2 white beads, then 1 white, one white, one black, two white beads, one white, one white, one black, two white beads, one white, one white, one white, and sewing through the last 2 beads. And now we get to start row number 6. Let's start with 1 black and 1 white, one white, one white, one white, one black, two white beads, one black, one white, one black, one white, one white and one black, one black, one black, one black, and one black, sewing through the last 2 beads. And now we get to start row number 7. Let's start with 2 black beads, one white, one white, one white, one black, one black, two white beads, one black, one black, one black, 1 white, 1 white, 2 black beads, 1 black, 1 black, 1 black, 1 black, 1 black, and sew through the last 2 beads. Now we get to start row number 8. Let's start with 1 black and 1 white bead, 1 white, 1 white, 1 white, 1 white, 1 black, 1 white, 1 gold and 1 white, 1 white, 1 black, 1 black, 1 white, 1 white, 1 white, 1 white and 1 black, 1 black, 1 black, 1 black, 1 black, 1 black, and 1 black. Sewing through the last 2 beads, and now we get to start row number 9. Let's start with 2 white beads, 1 white, 1 gold, 1 gold, 1 white, 1 black, 1 black, 1 white, 2 white beads, 1 white, 1 black, 1 black, 1 1 white, 1 silver, 1 white, 1 white, 2 white beads, 1 copper, 1 copper, 1 copper, 1 copper, 1 copper, 1 copper, and 1 copper. Sewing through the last 2 beads. And now we get to start row number 10. Let's start with 2 white beads, 1 white, 1 white, 1 gold, 1 white, 1 white, 1 black, 1 white, 1 white, 1 white, oh no, I'm sorry, 2 white, 1 white, 1 white, 1 black, 1 white, 1 white, 1 white, 1 white, 1 white, 2 white beads, 1 black, 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 and 1 black. Sewing through the last 2 beads. And now we get to start row number 11. Let's start with 2 white beads, 1 white, 1 1 white, 1 white, 1 gold, 1 white, 1 white, 1 white, 1 white, 1 white, 2 white beads, 1 white, 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 2 white beads, 1 white, 1 copper, 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 and 1 white. Sewing through the last 2 beads. And now we get to start row number 12. Let's start with 2 white beads, 1 white, 1 white, 1 white, 1 gold, 1 gold, 1 white, 1 white, 1 white, 1 white, 1 white, 2 white beads, 1 white, 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 2 white beads, 1 white, 1 black, 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 and 1 white. Sewing through the last 2 beads. And that completes our 12 rows for our triangle. Now, if this is the first triangle you've ever done with me, I add connection beads and I cap the corners. Some sides will have connection beads and some sides will not. That is so that our units can connect together. So in this particular unit, we are not going to have any connection beads on this side, but we are going to have connection beads on this side, and we are not going to have connection beads on top. So the first thing that I like to do is cap my corner by adding 1 white bead, and it turns that corner into a little point. Now what I like to do is turn over my unit and sew without picking up any beads, because we're not adding any to this side. I'm just going to sew through 1 bead at a time following this quadrant line, and we're going to end up coming out of this bead right here. So this is our goal. And you don't have to sew through the same beads that I am. I just am sewing up 1 bead per row. So if you want to choose different beads, that's okay to sew through. I just find it super easy to sew through the ones that are along this quadrant line, and that's why I choose these. But while I am doing this, I usually do the question of the day. And so the question of the day is, do you have any musicians in your family? Let me know. I have 1 musician, total music lover. Well, I think the whole family kind of loves music, but I have one that has dedicated his life to music, moved out to New York to surround himself with the music industry, and is just loving life being there. And yeah, so this was kind of dear to my heart when it came to creating this one. And so yeah, so I have 1 full-fledged musician in my family. Alrighty, so put it down in the comments so that I can read your comments. I just love to hear about all of the things that you guys are commenting about when it comes to those questions of the day. I love them so much. And if you don't want to answer that question, just put a music emoji in the comments. I would love to see that too. Alrighty, so now we're coming out of this corner bead. Let's cap this corner with 1 white bead. And now we're going to sew our connection beads up this side. So let's start with 1 white, 1 white, 1 white, 1 white, 1 white, 1 gold, 1 white, 1 white, 1 white, 1 white, and 1 white. Now we get to cap this third and last corner with 1 white bead. And now what we're going to do is we're just going to sew up 6 rows or 6 beads. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and 6. Now I'm coming out of the top of this bead. Let's sew down the bead right next to it. So we're sewing in the opposite direction. And then up the bead right next to that one. We're creating this zigzag so that it makes this bead so much more secure and so that it doesn't get loose or fall out. Now we're coming out of the top of this bead. Let's sew up 2 more beads or 2 more rows, 1 and 2. And let's do another zigzag. Coming out of the top of this bead, let's sew down the bead right next to it. And sew up the bead right next to that one. Then sew up 2 more rows. And now that we've done 2 of those zigzags, I feel very confident that these last beads that we added are not going to be loose or anything like that when we're trying to connect our units. So that was very important to do those zigzags. But now we are ready to cut our thread. So holding on to our thread with our long nose pliers and getting our scissors as close to the bead as possible without cutting the bead, just snip off the thread. And that completes your number 1 unit. We only need 5 of these, so go ahead and do this 4 more times, and I will see you in a sec. That was so much fun. Thank you so much for being here with me today and beading along with me. Remember to like and subscribe and hit that bell button so you're notified when the next video comes out. I can't wait to see you there. Thanks for watching.